In the past, people, when they were under a lot of pressure, would explode. But I get the feeling that nowadays, especially for younger leaders, instead of an explosion, we have an implosion. So people are under a lot of stress. They start being too demanding on themselves. They start feeling frustrated. They start getting demotivated. They need to push for more, but they don't really have the energy. And then that's what ends in a burnout. When you tell people what you want them to do, don't tell them to cut rocks. Tell them that they're cutting rocks for a beautiful building. So how do they fit in the bigger picture? Sometimes leaders avoid challenging people in the fear that they won't be seen as nice. And there is this acronym for NICE, which I use many times in trainings, and it says NICE means nothing in me cares enough.
Ellie, it's a real pleasure to have you here, and thanks for making the time to be on the show.
Thank you for the invite, Damian.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's going to be a very interesting conversation. You come from a very interesting background, so let's talk about it for a moment. Would you mind introducing yourself? Give us the overview of you and your background, if that's okay.
Sure. So Eleftheria, the difficult Greek name, but people call me Ellie now on this side of the world. I am like an original Greek, came to Latin America about 15 years ago. And I say that, professionally, I'm born and raised in consulting because I spent about 14 years in total, both in Europe and also here in Brazil. And I kind of got into consulting because I was not decided what I wanted to do. And I wanted to, get to know the world. So what better opportunity to, go from here, there, experience many different industries, many different clients. And I was very lucky that I got to do that. So, I work in 25 different organizations between Europe and Latin America. And, sort of the first part, I was doing everything, like all the functions, strategy, sales, operations, M&As, marketing, you name it. And then I discovered what I really like, which is the people topics, or what we called organization back in the day. And I dedicated the second half doing that kind of work between top teams and leadership development journeys. And then also during the last years, a bit more of implementation work. So I was on the side of people that made the performance side of transformation possible. And that's where I kind of like being able to see, like the trajectory of the projects and the ideas that they became reality, in which ones worked and which ones didn't. And that's when I decided that I actually wanted to implement and execute. And I took the leap of faith out of consulting and into the startup world. So I joined Nuvemshop. And I think I was also very lucky because it was a second school, kind of like McKinsey had been for many years. And I learned a lot there about what it means to execute and to build culture and to build a team. Like, not from the person who gives the advice, but the point of view of who actually does it. And then I also realized that this was not for me. Like, the execution is not where I shine the best. Actually, I think I like better, and I am also better in developing other people. So after a couple of years at Nuvemshop, I left, and now I'm working as an executive coach and advisor to startups.
Well, pretty nice power to summarize an extensive background, and it is great that you're doing that. And what's interesting about you is that you come from that side of the, we were talking the other day about this. You come from the consulting world, but also have the application side. You're going in and executing. You of course realize what where you felt better, but it's great that you have those two sides of the coin, and that's very interesting. So based on your on your perspectives, on the things you learn and you were able to observe in relation to the role of the HR leaders, what would you say is the main job of the CHRO? What should a CHRO should focus on? What's the most important job they can do?
I think the most important thing is to provide the talent that the business needs. It's a little bit like the CFO, they provide like the financial capital. I see the CHRO as providing the human capital. So not just for today, but for the long run, whatever it is. Like if I were to summarize it, that would be that.
You saw a lot of different things, working with so many different companies in different projects. And I wanted to ask you this question is, do you see any belief or common practice that HR leaders or business leaders in general have that are doing a disservice to their companies or hurting their companies more than it's helping them? Any practice, any belief that you probably don't agree with, you know?
I think sometimes there is, and that's a limiting belief. I'll tell you why I think that. But I think there is a blurry limit as to where the responsibility of the manager resides with regards to the people and where starts the responsibility of HR. And to me, it's not a blurry line at all. Like it's really the responsibility of the manager and the leaders to take care of their team and grow their team and have the difficult conversations or the growth conversations or whatever you want to call them. To me, that's very clear. And I think in theory, many people will agree that it's clear and HR should be there, as a sort of a supporting partner in this journey. But in practice, what happens oftentimes is that, managers are not prepared or for whatever other reason, they don't feel like they can or that they want to dedicate enough time to their team. And then they end up outsourcing some of these responsibilities to HR. I think it's a very big mistake to make, and it's definitely a disservice. It's like, if you were a chef and you were talking to whoever brings you the vegetables, bring them cut for me. I mean, you're the chef. You're the one supposed to cut the vegetables and make the dish, right? However you cut the vegetables will have an impact on the dish you're making. You can't ask for it to come cut. But this is what sometimes happens between the leadership and HR. Or, like, come here, HR, and arrange my kitchen. But then when you want to cook, you don't know where the saucepan is, So I think that's a disservice.
Mm-hmm. And what are some of the things that are kind of outsourced to HR that leaders shouldn't outsource? What do you see?
The leadership development, for example, the development of the team. How do you develop the team below you? Many times tough conversations. Sometimes the firing conversation, the managers want the HR to have it. So. You look like that's not a good thing,
job,
right? But I think that you cannot outsource to HR when you're having problems, or maybe people within the team are not getting along, or you're not getting along with someone in your team, and then it's okay to ask for an opinion and a thought partner, but the leadership of that needs to stay with the leader, not with HR.
So I can imagine that sometimes it's hard for leaders to realize, when should I really involve HR in these situations, the different situations that you're talking about. So what are the things that, or the situations where these leaders could call HR and ask, for help,
It's fine to call and ask for help. It's different. And I don't even like calling it HR. I call it the people function. Because it's,
People find,
yes,
well, traditionally,
this is
right?
fine. Because sometimes HR is like seen as this, just ticket resolver or
Right.
complete admin. And I don't think that's
True.
right.
Yeah.
So, I like to call it the people function. It's a bit of semantics. But in my head, the people function is, a partner to you as a leader all the time. It's not like you're going to call only when you have a problem.
Yeah.
You can use that function as a thought partner over time. And then they will also be involved and know what happens in the company, in the teams, etc. So at least in Nuvemshop, that's how we were implementing it. So we always had someone close to the leaders who was on a regular basis there to discuss their own challenges and also the challenge with their teams. And then when, a difficult decision had to be made, or you didn't know what to do, you could talk about it. And that's totally fine. But you cannot outsource the responsibility to someone else to execute whatever it is you want to execute, right? You're not going to say, okay, so let's say my team has trouble prioritizing. HR, come and give them a training on prioritizing. It's not going to work. Like, you're responsible for developing your team and helping them prioritize it. So I think the limits of that sometimes get blurry, and it's not a good thing.
And I think it also cuts your own development as a leader.
Absolutely.
Right? Because having those crucial conversations, having those or those one-on-ones or those trainings that kind of put a topper into your ability to develop as a leader as well.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I mean, if you want to develop as a leader and go to the next level, whatever that is, you should have someone to stay in your current position. You can't
Yeah.
go up unless you develop or prepare somehow for someone else to stay there. And
Right. Was talking to this guy was a software director at a very big company we all know, and he was telling me when he chose that profession, software development, because he didn't like to deal with people. But eventually, as he grew and as he was promoted, he realized that the job was to deal with people.
yeah,
Right? So yeah.
I think that nowadays there is a little bit more of a possibility there because, and I mean, I think that's also where the future is going. So you should be able to grow, becoming a specialist in whatever you do and continue, to have more impact as an individual contributor. And that's great. If you don't like people, you shouldn't have to lead people. Like, again, it's like we said, like I said, no, I don't like this part. I want to focus on this part, and that's okay. But we should give these opportunities to the talent we have within companies, that they continue growing and they continue excelling at what they're very good at, instead of forcing them to become something that maybe they have no interest or no aptitude to become, right? So maybe someone is an amazing developer, but they're not so good with people. Why should we lose a great developer to have a bad manager?
Yeah, that's a fair point. And that kind of creates a different set of questions as well. Typically in a company, unless you're in sales, right? Well, the more you sell, the more you make. Typically, the way you make more money in a company is when you're promoted.
Yeah.
Right. So what about those people, as we're talking now, that are not, probably they don't want to be promoted and they don't want to go to the next, levels of responsibility because I like to code, for example, and I'm a great software developer.
Yeah.
So how do you compensate those people? How you keep increasing their compensation based on performance, of course, if they are not being promoted, right? So
Yeah.
it's kind of
But you can promote people based on their seniority, not necessarily on leading other people. So you have like two different paths somehow, no? So like you can go on an individual contributor seniority path, and then yes, somehow you would need to prove that you have more impact. But I think it is possible, like a great developer does do the job of 10 mediocre developers. So you can continue growing, and then, you can continue shaping more the agenda of I don't know, whatever it is, infrastructure or whatever you use in the tech department, or you can act as someone who attracts other tech talent. There are other ways for you to add to the company and bring impact without necessarily leading people. You can take on, more crucial projects, or you can work with smaller teams, but not within that, standardized. Okay, so now I have 3 people below me. Now I have 5. Now I have 10. Now I have 2 teams of 10. Not everybody likes that, and I think that we are forcing people into a path that is not fulfilling and with a bit of a trap, because then they can't come out because they would make a lot less money.
Yeah. And I think when you think about that, if I'm a team leader, I want to see, well, is this person willing to go to the managerial sort of career, the individual contributor? How can I, as a leader, identify who wants to do what?
Yeah, I think that's a good question. And actually, I think that it's a question that can be answered on 3 different levels. So the first level is the company level, because I, as a manager, it would be pointless to have this conversation unless there is a path for this person to grow without growing as a manager as well. So, I mean, that needs to be designed on the company level, and that's where the people function can have a say, and it's something that can be part of the value proposition of the specific jobs. Now, the second level is exactly the level of the manager, and I think that we could start by simply asking. I think it's a bit impressive how many times we try to find for some very elaborate way to do something when we can ask. Now the question is, just have a conversation. Where do you see yourself in 5 years from now? Or, as you continue here to grow, how do you imagine that you can increase your impact within the company? What can we do to help you develop it? This kind of questions, which are actually pretty rare from what I hear, these career conversations. But I also think that they shouldn't happen in a vacuum, right? Because if you're with your team, but you don't have an open and honest relationship, and you're not used to sharing things and feedback and the ideas, and have a real dialogue, it's tough to go and then have expectation that the person will say, you know what, like I don't see myself here in 5 years, and I don't want to become. It's tough. So, I think it's a simple conversation to the extent that you have built that kind of rapport and relationship and trust with your team members, that they can be open and honest with you. And then I think there's also the level of the person themselves, because that's also a similar disservice that I've seen happening a lot, is that people expect, their managers or HR or whoever is the company drive their careers. But in the end of the day, we're all responsible. Like, if you don't want to do that, like, you're the one who'll be doing something that they don't like, and suffering. If you don't want to do that, say it.
Mm.
If you say you don't want to do that, it's good to have an answer of what do you want to do, instead. So I think people sometimes they don't, invest much in answering those questions for themselves, because it's more comfortable to, say, okay, so that's the past. It's part of the game. That's what I'm going to
Yeah,
do.
yeah, it requires a lot of introspection and self-reflection as well.
Yeah.
I think that's actually something you talk a lot about when it comes to leadership, right? Changing the topic here a little
Yeah.
bit, but I heard you saying that to be a good leader, you first need to lead yourself.
Yes.
So what do you mean by that?
Well, I think, it's either through some examples, but how will you prioritize, for instance, for your team, if you can't prioritize your own time, how you spend your time?
Mm.
Or, how are you going to put objectives to your team and stick to them if you can't stick to your own objectives? Or how are you going to even be compassionate with your team and, help them grow if you're not compassionate with yourself? So, you know, I think we neglect this part of the growth of the person as they advance. So most times what happens is someone is a great individual contributor. And like you said, the natural next path is to become a manager. But no one really prepares this person to become a manager. And, in the midst of all the new things that they have to do, it's tough to find the time for introspection and thinking, okay, does this work for me? Does not work? What am I doing right? What am I doing wrong? And it's actually funny because people keep progressing in their careers and they become senior and they still don't get that kind of help. Maybe they start learning, how to deal with some situations or develop some skills, but we all continually grow and we all continually need new skills. Where are we going to get the support for those? It's tough. People don't quite get it. So I think that there is a lot of pressure. And I think if we look around, it's pretty evident there's a lot of pressure on leadership. And sort of, I'm working with this hypothesis that in the past, people, when they were under a lot of pressure, it would explode. You have, like in the movies, or maybe you live through that, but those people that start shouting and banging their hands, and and
Yeah.
it's an explosion. But I get the feeling that nowadays, especially for the younger leaders, instead of an explosion, we have an implosion. So people are under a lot of stress. They start being too demanding on themselves. They start feeling frustrated. They start getting demotivated. They need to push for more, but they don't really have the energy. And then that's what ends in a burnout. So like there's a lot of pressure, and instead of giving it out, it's like
Yeah,
you bury, 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 bury,
your
and then
stuff. Yeah.
you end up hurting yourself as a leader.
So you're talking about the fact that you may have mentors, of course, during the course of your career, but no one really teaches you how to be a leader, and the ins and out and the skills. Kind of you learn them as you go,
Yes.
right? And you've been able to see from your time at McKinsey, executives at big companies, large organizations, and also working with startup leaders and startup founders. But when you think about the leaders in general, what are the things or the challenges that they face typically when it comes to leadership? What it's difficult? What do they need help with mostly?
I want to make a comment about what you said about you have mentors around you. But I want to share a very quick incident that for me, it was very telling of the degree of loneliness that we have in organizations. So I was once with a top team and we were doing sort of a top team alignment journey. And I would have these individual discussions in the beginning, sort of to like diagnostic. And then I was telling one of the people, it was the tech director, VP, and said, look, so the idea here is that you give feedback and you help each other grow. Like you're all together in this and we are here to also, and you will develop each other. And the person started crying. He was so moved by the possibility that his colleagues might invest in his own growth that he started crying. And I think that's what we're facing, like, yes, you can have mentors, but do we really feel that there are other people invested in our own success around us? I don't know that we do. And I think this is a little bit of like sort of to the question you asked. It's kind of been underneath all this. I think we have a trust problem. So like leaders don't know how to build trust with their teams to deliver and with the peers to get support and to trust themselves also to rise to the occasion, So it creates, a storm condition. And I think some people struggle with one side and some others struggle with others. But in the end of the day, how can I be sure that my team's going to be there for me? How am I going to be sure that the peers are going to be there for me? And how can I build such a relationship that I'm there for them as well?
And what do you think is the blocker? Why is that happening? Is it, I want to keep my image as the super strong leader? I don't want to hear feedback from others. It's ego. What do you think? It's a blocker.
I think it comes in many flavors, the blockers. But in the end of the day, what's below are a few beliefs that we have about leadership, right? That, a leader should do it alone. That's what a hero, a hero does it all alone, doesn't need help, doesn't ask for others, like in the end of the day. And, a leader knows everything. He or she has the best decisions, he has the best answers, he has the best viewpoint. And I think if you believe those two things, it's very tough to leverage your team. It's very tough to leverage other people. It's very tough to open up when you need help. It's very tough to prioritize others and not just yourself, because, if you don't prioritize yourself, who else will? Because everybody else is thinking the same way. And I'm a bit of a romantic, but I think that, it's high time that we build a new sort of workplace. It's clear that this is not working. I mean, you look around, it's not working, this model that we have. So, how can we be more humane? And how can we bring more trust in whatever we do? Starting with ourselves, trusting ourselves to do better, And trust, again, doesn't mean that we have all the answers. But trust in ourselves that, we can continue trying and we can continue evolving and finding ever more answers.
Right.
And, being in the game, that in itself is some sort of success.
And do you think that it's probably the definition or what's causing that, besides the blockers and the ego and the thing, is what we think a leader should be, or the image of what a leader really is? And we kind of, because of that, we have some false notion of what a leader is that makes us act that way and build and think that we should have all the answers and think that we should tell other people what to do and think that those sort of things. But if you had to, in your own perspective, how would you define what a leader is?
I think the leader is that person that delivers the results. That's the responsibility of a leader, but through their team over time, sustainably over time. That would be a good leader. Now, how you do it is, the question. But I think if we had these three sort of tests, and they were all three at all times for our behaviors as leaders, I think we would be in a much better place. So, like, is it driving results? Is it driving through the team? And is it sustainable in the long run?
So what was that again? So
is it driving results, what I'm doing? Because I'm saying that because, sometimes there is this discussion of, Or a false trade-off view is like, okay, so but as a leader, should I focus on the results or should I focus on the team? Should I focus on the business or should I take care of the team? And I think this is a false dichotomy because, you cannot deliver results unless you deliver them through the team. You do it for 1 quarter, but, over time, you can't continue growing unless you get some leverage, right? You're a leader. So, and also on the other hand, taking care of the team doesn't mean overprotecting them or not giving them work or not challenging them or having them take it easy. So I think it's a little bit of a, I don't know, I get upset about this. Have a childish view, not a childish, but to treat them, to juniorize them or whatever you call that. People want to deliver. They want to make things happen. We as humans want to create. We want to see the difference of our work. So we want to be challenged. If you leave someone parked there with nothing to do, it's not like they're going to be happy. But I think sometimes leaders avoid challenging people in the fear that they won't be seen as nice. And there is this acronym for NICE, which I use many times in trainings, and it says NICE means nothing in me cares enough. So I'm nice, means I don't care.
Haven't heard of that one.
Yeah, I really like it. So, no, you as a leader, depends how you do it, but you want to deliver the results. You want to be focused on the business. You want to be making an impact. That's what the team is there for. But in order to do that over time, you also need to challenge your team and grow the team, to bring them to give their best self. And that's motivating. It's not a bad thing. It doesn't make people unhappy.
So that's challenging because I can imagine it's really hard to find the balance between, taking, making sure your team feels, with a proper workload, but as well challenged and stretched enough for them to be able to grow, and how you treat them and project confidence and earning their respect. It's hard.
No one said it's easy.
Hard.
Yeah.
But if you had to give leaders some sort of the skills that they cannot lack if they want to be effective leaders, something like a toolbox, right? Those things that they really need to have, because otherwise they won't be effective leaders.
Okay.
Anything that comes to mind?
Yeah, I think that it's a pretty simple framework, and I haven't invented it. But I think for people to do the job, they need 3 things. So the first one is clarity. So what do they need to do? The second one is capability. Right? Can they do it? And the third one is motivation. So, if I know what I have to do and I'm able, how am I going to do it? And I think like giving these 3, you get, 90% there. But again, it's simple. It's not easy. So if we were to double-click on each one of those, what does clarity mean, right? So first of all, the leader themselves, they need to know what's the problem that they're trying to solve. And they need to have this understanding together with the team. And, that might sound very obvious, but it's easier said than done. Like, you really need to understand what the problem is. So to give you an example, I was working with a top team of an AI company. And they were, all working and thinking about how can we be faster to deploy our solution to different sort of industries. And they were putting all the resources and then all sorts of things on the roadmap, etc. And it was not going as fast as they wanted and all. And then we were having a discussion, and what we got to is that actually they wanted to sign more clients from different industries, but they didn't need a finished product for that. They could actually do a partnership and develop the product with these new clients, and that would reduce their risk both for them and also the entry cost for their clients, and therefore the risk for their clients. And that was a much better route, but it was a different problem. The problem was not how do we deploy our product. The problem is how do we sign new clients. See, so it seems obvious what's a problem we want to solve.
Asking the right question.
But
right?
Exactly, like going deep down in the problem and solving for the right thing and doing it together with the team to also develop this kind of critical thinking below. So that's one thing with clarity. And the other one that, sometimes it's clear, but it's clear in the heads of the leader. It's not so clear in the heads of the other people. Like, what are the expectations? What does success look like? So what do I expect to see? Not just, like the title, but in terms of quality, in terms of how long it's going to take, a little bit more detail, and be aligned on that with the team. And not, like 3 months from now, I expect to see this, but what do I expect to see in a week? What do I expect to see in a month? Obviously, if you have more senior people in the team, you don't need to be very prescriptive. You can give them a project, and in 3 months, you expect to have the result. But, it doesn't hurt to check over time. Now, if you have a more junior team, they're not able to break it down. So you need to sit down and break it down with them. So that's a little bit around clarity. Then there's capability. And capability, I think is where most people struggle. Like, how do I develop the team below me? How do I transfer the skills that I have, right? And it's actually, I don't know, there's not much preparation for that. I think this is the least, where managers get, or leaders get least preparation. Because for the clarity and the motivation, you can find like OKRs and storytelling tools, etc. But I feel like for building capabilities, we don't really, have much to say, or it's not so common for people to go after that, at least in my experience. And I think that it's a part where managers either think that takes a lot of time, I don't have time to do it, or I'm not good at that. It's the part that is typically outsourced more, okay, give me some training. But in order to really develop capabilities, if you think about how adults learn, we don't learn like kids from watching a lecture or reading a book. We learn by doing. And I think that's the secret, if you wish, or, the 80-20. There's no silver bullet, but if there was, that might be it. To give space to people to experiment and implement and learn. And I think it's a mindset, really, for leaders to ask more questions and give less answers. Like instead of, when that goes back to having all the answers, right? Because if I feel like as a leader, I need to have all the answers, I also feel compelled to give them. And I feel compelled to force my answers because they're going to be better than everybody else. Now, if I don't feel like I need to have all the answers, I can ask the questions and be open that the answer might actually be different than what I had in mind. Test it in my work.
Yeah, I want to hear your thoughts on motivation as well. But what you were saying about this, I was talking to a former chairman of a very large consumer goods company, very large one. And he was telling me about this framework that the company used to develop their people. And you probably heard about it, but it's the 70, I think these were the numbers,
70,
but it was 70, 20, 10, right? There's 70 on the job, 20, with mentors, and 10, with formal training, formal education. But it's, it confirms what you said.
Absolutely. And I think
we
that,
learn really by doing.
I'm sorry.
No, that we learn by doing.
Yes. Yeah. And I think that, many times that leadership development programs are thought as if the 10 was 100 or the 90, but it's not really the case. So the way I like to see is, you start with the 10, which is sort of some theoretical basis or some tools or, some new ideas that we introduce. And then you go for the other 70 and 20. The 70 would be on the job and the 20 would be social learning, like, discussing it or getting feedback on it and this kind of thing. And what you have most typically is in training that lasts and they do, 2-3 days, whatever it is, poof, and gone. You pass the 3 days, it was a nice film you watched, and then, you continue with your life and nothing happens. And also from the, let's say from the people or HR side, or whoever the provider is, like 90% of the effort is on the 10%, and 10% of the effort is on the other 90. So, it's not enough to just design the 3 days. You need to think about, okay, how is it going to be implemented, and how can we continue talking about it, and how can we all, be working with and giving each other feedback and holding each other accountable. Because otherwise, there's not going to be any change.
Yeah, and the challenge, it's how you build those experiences for people to kind of learn on the job.
Yeah.
What have you seen and wanted to ask, what have you seen are some common ways to help with the 70%, right?
Yeah, I think first of all, the way that, the training itself, so the 10% should be built in a way that it's very hands-on. So it's not generic, but rather it's very applied to the actual challenges of the person at the moment, And because it's also something that leaders, adult learners need to have. Like they need to see the direct application, otherwise, few are motivated to go for it. And also, I would say that in the training itself, so during the 10%, you should already have the opportunity for the people to practice for the first time whatever you are introducing. Because the first time, you're scared. It's a new skill. You don't know exactly how to do it. It's very easy to say, okay, no, I have like this other very urgent things, important meetings, but in the space of the training of the protected time, you should go for that first application, because then the second time it's already easier, and you already have seen it, and you already got some insights, and you're already starting to feel how this can help you in your real life. But then, yes, like I said, I think that we need to have some sort of experiments that we design around it, and some sort of accountability mechanisms. It could be group, it could be one-on-one, it could be peers, whatever you design. But somehow, like these first times, there is a recurrence of the new skill that you're trying to build. Because it's like going to the gym. You start exercising a new muscle. The first time it hurts. The second time it hurts, but less. And after a few times, it's not so painful, and you actually see like it gets more defined. So it's, okay, that's interesting. But, you need to help people go through this first phase.
Right. Yeah, and creating the space and creating the programs, and each person needs something different as well. Well, with the AI, and that helps a little bit.
Yes, no,
I imagine.
absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think, but also going to the previous question, what can we do that, reinforces the implementation? If the leader expects to see these new skills in the day-to-day, and they actually ask for them. Like, for instance, we do problem solving, and we build an issue tree, and, we break it down. Okay, so then a week later, when someone comes with a problem to you, you say, okay, so where is your issue tree about that? So you force the use. If you don't have that, okay, yeah, we talked about an issue tree, pretty difficult to do, by the way. I'm not sure I'm doing it very well. The leader never asks for it, so yeah, can forget about it now and do as I've always done. So I think that's also where it's not about outsourcing the training. It's actually like working together and using it as part. But who's going to do it? The 20 and the 70% is the manager, is the direct leader of the person.
Right. There was a third element there.
Yes,
was
motivation.
The motivation. Yeah.
Yes. Motivation. I think the biggest mistake we make in motivation is that we think everybody gets motivated the same way we do. And then, we try to convince other people with the arguments that we would convince ourselves. So it's funny. Now, coincidentally, I did this personality assessment, and I talked to, I implemented it for a client, and I talked to 20 different people in the clients, like their top leader. And, we're talking about how recognition is an important driver, how people like to be recognized. With someone who had this need, high need, Ellie, who doesn't like to be recognized? Who doesn't want to be liked? Who doesn't want to be appreciated? And then the same afternoon, I had this other person who said to me, you know what? Give me money, but don't give me congratulations. And then, the next day, you have someones like, look, I was in this place, I was making more, but actually I left because I wanted, a better environment to work in and have more fun at work. And then the next day is like, oh, fun. No, but I have fun in the rest of my life. Work doesn't need to be fun. So, you talk to these people, and everybody has a very distinct view. Imagine having all these 4 people on your team. What do you do? And it's true, you have it, and especially if you're more senior and you have 100 people below you or 1,000 people below you, there are definitely people who think very different from how you think. So you need to speak the language of all these people. You need every time that you try to motivate people, unless you know their specific motivations individually, and by the way, it will be a great thing to know for your team members, like your immediate team. But if you start talking to larger groups, like have a function below you need to bring all the different motivators. You need to talk about all the different stories. You need to say about how is this going to impact the society? How is it going to impact your investors? How is it going to impact the company? How is it going to impact this team? How is it going to impact you? You're going to learn, you're going to make money, whatever it is. But you need to tell all these stories to the people, because the story that resonates with you won't resonate with everyone.
You're going to be some sort of psychologist as well and say,
I
I mean, when I say
you can ask,
psychologist,
right?
understanding, what triggers people, because as you were saying, everybody has different motivations or even preferences.
Yes.
But are there any sort of elements that motivate everyone, kind of motivate humans across the board?
Yeah, so there's this framework called the 5 sources of meaning, which I can briefly pass through now. And we all are motivated to some degree by them.
Mhm.
So it's imagine as if you had 100 motivation points and you would allocate them. Some you might allocate close to nothing. But the 5 sources of meaning would be society, like the impact you have in the world. Second would be your stakeholders, so investors or your customers, like the more immediate, let's say, ecosystem of your company. The third might be the company itself, like the legacy that you want to build, or being part of a successful entity, the name, whatever. The fourth one would be the team, as in belonging and being part of something that's fun to work with. You like people, you like to be there with them. And then the fifth one would be the personal gains, being those financial or non-financial, so like learning, advancement, opportunities. So there are many frameworks, but that's one framework. But the point is, whatever framework you decide to use, be aware that not everybody gets motivated the same way you do. Like some people want to go out there and win, but not everybody wants to win. Some people want to make a lot of money, but not everybody cares so much about the money. So I would suggest that for the immediate team, have a conversation, ask people. Maybe you go out on a team dinner or whatever, and instead of talking about the weather or football, you can talk about something like that.
Talk about that.
It's simple, really, and it's not. You don't make it sound like there are right and wrong answers. It's not something very vulnerable for people to talk about.
No, I'm not sure if you heard of this book, pretty famous book, Good to Great.
Mm-hmm.
And Good to Great, Jim Collins is the name of the author. And he talks about historically how companies went from being good to being great. And one of those elements is getting the right people on the bus, right? And he said if you get the right people on the bus, you don't really have to do a lot of motivation, because they motivate themselves, right? So when I think about that, it's a line between having to motivate people and give them vision and give them direction and the things they need to succeed. But then there's a thing which I think it's more a thing of probably my generation, which is the attitude towards work. Right? There's a story that there was a guy who would write to a town, and he found people working in a project. They were building something. And he approached. I'm not sure if you heard of that one, but he approached one and said, "Hey, well, what are you doing?" "Hey, I'm cutting stone." Right. So he walks a little bit more and he say, "Hey, what are you doing?" "Oh, I'm earning $10 a day." And then the last one say, "What are you doing?" "Hey, I'm building a beautiful building."
Yes.
Right. So their vision and their attitude towards the work they were doing, the work was the same, but their vision was different and their attitude towards what they're doing was different. So how much is motivation and how much is the person's attitude?
I think what you're saying, the self-drive.
The right person in. Yeah.
Well, I have 2 comments on that one. The first one is, and actually it's going to be my second point around motivation, that, when you tell people what they need to do, what you want them to do, don't tell them to cut rocks. tell them that they're cutting rocks for a beautiful building. So like, how do they
Right.
fit in the bigger picture? And you'd be impressed how many people have no idea how what they're doing is going to serve like the business objectives. No idea. So of course, like it's tough to motivate to get self-motivated because it looks like something very, why am I
What
even
am I doing?
doing
What am
this?
I doing this for?
Like, no, I want to be doing CEO stuff. You're telling me to do
Yeah.
an Excel. So I think that's on the leader's part. But I see your point about the self-drive. And I think that is true. And, some people are maybe, I'm not sure if they're more motivated, but they take more initiative, or, they have like more of a leadership stance of going ahead and like driving things. But I'm not sure that, a company made only of those people would also be enough, because they also tend to push in their own direction. And you also need, some team players behind to, okay, folks, it's a good direction. Let's put our effort behind that. And also, I think that for these profiles, actually, the job of the leader is not to demotivate people, because you can very well bring these people on and then demotivate them. Like if it's not clear why you're asking things, or if you keep changing the direction and they never get to finish anything, or if you're micromanaging them. So there are many ways in which you can screw it up with someone who came in with a lot of intrinsic motivation, and then it's like, okay, so instead of making an effort,
Yes.
it's like just step by step, like Steve Jobs was saying, that bring great people and then I'll let them do their thing, right?
Challenging. Yeah.
Not
Interesting.
easy.
Interesting. Yeah. Well, that's the challenge of being a leader.
No, I think it's the most rewarding thing. People really will be the fun.
So, question about to kind of close that part, and actually, you posted something about this not too long ago. You have a team member. You put enough resources and effort into their development, etc. How do you know when you should let someone go or keep trying?
I think you need to see the signs of improvement. And in all honesty, I think it really boils down to the attitude of the person that you mentioned. I mean, a person with a great attitude, even if they're not performing, it's probably because they're not in the right job. But maybe there is another, role that they could do, and you still want to hold on to them. But a person with not the adequate attitude, and that could be different from company to company, but I think that for the purposes of our discussion here, I think it's pretty clear what we mean, the person who wants to improve, who is open to feedback, wants to do better, wants to take initiative, wants to move ahead, wants to make a difference, wants to contribute. So that would be the right attitude. So a person who is like that, and you show them which path they have to go to in order to improve. I think it might be a question of time, and you may not want to wait for the time that it would take them, and that's a different discussion. But with enough time, they would progress, and then you can tell if the progress is too slow or or fast enough. But I think what people make, it's not really a mistake. I think it's an avoidance tactic. But you say, okay, so I'm going to give this person 3 months. But in 3 months, nothing has happened. But you could see that nothing has happened in a week, in 2 weeks, in a month. Why would you wait? Like if someone who gets a tough feedback and it's clear that they're not going to stay with the company unless they improve dramatically, and they do nothing for the first month, they're not going to do anything for the other 2 months. They're going to be looking for a job. Like, let's be honest. So I think the moment you decide is you give a little bit of time and you start seeing the signs and you start seeing the attitude of the person towards what you said.
Yeah, because there's so many elements around why people wouldn't perform at their best.
Yes.
Is the job, is the people, is the boss, is the so many
Sometimes
different
it's also the moment,
elements.
right? So it can happen that something happens in the personal life of someone And
as well.
no, for that moment, they're not performing. But if it's someone who has, historically been a good performer, solid or great, and there's something happening, like have the honest conversation, what is happening? Maybe they lost motivation, maybe there's something else going on, address it. And honestly, I also think that, sometimes we are scared of letting someone go, but they're not even happy staying.
Mhm.
I even see that like in startups where there are people who have come on board from the beginning and they're very loyal. And the founders feel like they owe them part of the success of the company. And it may be true. And they would never fire them. And these people, out of loyalty, they would never go by themselves either. But they're not happy. No one is happy. Like the founder is not happy, the person is not happy because clearly
No
everybody
one
has
talks
moved
about it.
on and grown and they haven't been able to follow. But no one talks about it. So, yeah, I think that sometimes we could take people out of their misery, if we are honest with them.
Yeah, yeah. Also, I believe I have personally. Yeah, you may, someone might not be performing in your team, and you have to let that person go for different reasons. But I believe that as people, as humans, we all have like enormous potential to do great things as long as we're in the right place, as long as we're using our skills, doing what we like or what we find challenging, but that we have natural ability towards, right?
Yeah.
And I believe, and that's something I believe. It's not. It's finding the right, putting the people in the right place,
Yeah.
right? And I think that's the challenging.
Yeah.
That's the challenging part. But as long as you do that, I think you have, they say A players and A player. You know how you probably heard about,
Yeah.
hire A player. I don't believe in that. Everyone's an A player as long as they're in the right place.
Yeah.
That's what I
Yeah.
believe. I'm not sure what you think of
I
that.
think that some people are, they adapt in more circumstances and, they find it easier to acquire different skill sets. But I fundamentally agree with what you're saying. Nobody is perfect in everything. So, it's a matter of also helping the other person find what they're good at. And sometimes, unfortunately, it goes by, discarding some hypothesis and saying, okay, so that was not it. So what's the next thing? But I think we also don't treat it that way as a society, and then it makes it very difficult both for the person who gets rejected somehow, and also for the leader that has to bring these news. Everything becomes so much tougher. But now if you put Usain Bolt to swim, she probably wouldn't be an A player. You know what I mean? Like
Right.
that's fine. No one expects him to be. Why do we expect, that of people in business?
Exactly. And I think that's why we build teams, because
Also,
if we all had all the skills, and if we all were good at everything, why would we need other people,
yeah,
right?
I've had this discussion before with someone, a leader. We spent about 2 hours in a coaching session until he got to the conclusion that not everybody needed to be a replica of himself. And I know that it was someone it was in a startup, and someone who had grown with the startup but didn't have much, previous experience. And I'm saying that it's not to judge the person at all. I'm saying that because we put people in positions with very little preparation. And sometimes, things that seem so obvious to us may not be so obvious to other people. Just like I am certain that he is much better at executing than I am, like making decisions and being fit. But, he had that blind spot and he needed to develop it. So, and again, like I think we can be a little bit more compassionate with ourselves and with other people for, having to develop in certain areas that we're not so great at. And there's nothing wrong with that.
Fully agree with that. I wanted to ask you about culture.
Mm.
There's a saying, and I'm sure you heard of this, cultures it's strategy for breakfast,
Yes,
but I think culture, there's so many different definitions, and
yes.
people have different beliefs in relation to what a company culture is.
Mm.
But if you have And also that inside a company you have as well subcultures
Yes,
at the
especially
same
as
time,
it grows. Yes.
especially as it grows. But what is a company culture, and what do you identify as the elements that make up that culture?
I think that company culture is like how things get done,
Mm.
how things get done around here. It's definitely not the values that we put on the wall. Like that in some cases aspirational culture that we would like, but really how things get done around here is what it's about. And I think there are three moments of truth of what culture is of a company. And it's the people you hire, the people you promote, and the people you fire. So in these three moments, you send the strongest signals to the company as what you value and what you don't value. And that's what's going to be the company of the culture. So let's say, if we are a company that, I don't know, we care for our people, see that a lot, we care for our people. And then, you have, I know it's to use the stereotype, you have this cutthroat salesperson who doesn't collaborate with anyone, is abrupt, does not respect other people, only thinks about himself, but he closes most of the clients, he brings most of the deals, and we promote this person over the other people. So now the message we're passing is not that we care for our people, because it's not a role model of caring. So the culture is, cutthroat, do whatever you have to get your results done, get your numbers. It doesn't matter. So this is what I'm saying. Or, you have someone who's a good performer, but it's toxic again, or like does not collaborate, or, has unethical behavior, whatever it is. And you fire that person, even though that they were doing a good job, even though it's tough for the long run to be doing a good job, but whatever. So then you pass a message that, it's not about winning at all costs. We still, we respect our boundaries. And I mean, there are different examples of that, but people notice how others behave, and they notice which behavior gets rewarded and which behavior gets punished.
So you got to be careful what you put as your, culture and values, right? And got to be, not saying tough, but kind of rigid and clear and committed to those values that as well make up the culture. So
And
if
that's
I
if I were to make a comment on the values,
yeah,
I think that whatever the values are, you as a leader and the leadership as a group or a level, you should have enough stories to corroborate these values. Stories of what the company has done in different moments, the sort of thing that gets passed from generation to generation if you're talking about a family, but the stuff of legends of the company. You should have stories to back up the values. Otherwise, you may as well call them the aspirational values and think how you're going to implement them. Because if you don't have examples to give and corroborate, then it's just words.
so there are two different scenarios, because when you're a startup founder, you don't have a lot of story.
Oh, you do have a lot of stories. Of course you do.
So the question is, how do you, if I'm a startup founder
Hmm.
and I want a culture like in a certain way, how do I build that culture consciously? Or it's going to be up to, who I hire and how we, move
Yeah.
and do things? Because can you think about that right from the beginning, or is after you have a,
Okay. So when I say that, I think a founder after a year has plenty of stories already.
well, yeah, let's say a year. Okay.
But if you're a founder and you have a small team, well, first of all, you are the culture.
Okay.
You are the culture. Like
You are
you are the culture. And then you have a small team, I don't know, 10 people, and probably there are going to be people who share a lot of your values. And those people, they are living the culture. So at that point, I don't think you need to put it in words, because everyone is so close together and they're drinking from each other's energy so much that that's the culture. Don't need to put words to it. The experience, how things get done, you see it around you every day. You're immersed in it. There's no doubt how things get done. The issue is when you start growing, because it's not such a full immersion anymore. People are a little bit in the outskirts of that system, and they start but not having that direct experience with the say, what do you call that thing you put?
Founder.
Yes, the thing that you put in the bread that then grows. Like the founder and the
The
founding
lever.
team.
How do you say?
Yes,
Yeah, I know what you say. Yeah.
that's the part, and then that grows. It makes the bread, but then if you add the outskirts of the bread, you're not feeling it so much. And I think that's when you can start putting it into words, and it would be a good exercise to involve more people in it of how they're experiencing it. I mean, there are ways to go. You can go bottom up, kind of crowdsourcing what the views are about the culture. You can be more top down and say, okay, so like we are the leaders and that's what we want, and you crystallize it. But I think an interesting exercise that can form the base of that is to ask yourself and your founding team or even the entire company, what are moments of pride? Like which moments did they feel proud to be part of the company? And probably the sort of things they're going to talk about. That's like at the heart of the culture. And then you document it. And I think it's a living, document or whatever it is that you should go back and revisit as you grow. And I think it's also very useful to not to be just about words, but how does it translate in behaviors? What does it mean we do, and also what does it mean we don't do? So for Nuvemshop operators, when I joined, there was a 15 pages document that described the culture, which I found that it was there already. And I mean, it was a bit of a test for people, for recruits. They would send it to potential hires. And I mean, it's a company that works a lot with, offline docs. So if you're not prepared to read 15 pages when you're recruiting, you're not going to be happy there reading pages and pages and writing documents, because that's how it works, So it was already a test.
Right.
But it was then we made a shorter version, for the world we're living in. But it was about what do we expect from people? Like what sort of behavior? How do they react to certain things? What do we expect to see? What do we expect to not see? So the more tangible you can be about it, the better it is. And then then the companies start growing, and then maybe you buy other companies, and then you need to find sort of the common denominator for the bigger entity now. But what the way I see it is, in the beginning, you have this little nucleus of people, and they are the culture, and then it grows a little bit, and that's the culture. And then as you grow, you are going to have to tolerate some diversity around that, because it's statistical now. The people you bring in, they're not going to be as aligned as those first 10 people. But maybe that's the moment to go again and redefine what the nucleus is, like the stuff we don't accept divergence from. And there may not be that many. That's fine. But we know that we want everybody to share. And then outside of that, people are free to bring their best self and enrich the culture, right? So, I mean, the more diversity you bring in, it becomes richer. And it's lived in different ways, etc. But I think you need to be clear what's bearing the scent.
And you mentioned just something interesting there. The more diversity you bring in, that's gonna. So that's interesting, because the D&I initiatives, that companies have, of course, that's great. But bringing in diversity won't. I mean, the culture that you try dilute the culture, right?
Yes.
That you're trying to build.
And I think diversity is good, but it doesn't need to be 100% different than what you have.
Right.
That's why I'm saying it's important to get to a nucleus that it's very important for you, and that like you won't accept much of difference. But it doesn't mean you only have like one type of person. But they have some values that they share. And I think ideally everybody should share these values. Like, and there is a selection effect from who you bring in and from also who stays in. But that you should try to protect. It's not 100% of a person, that's 10%.
No,
And
right.
then you have like the other 90. Yes, it can be diverse. But and that adds. But, I don't think that, I agree that you can dilute the culture if you don't have very clear, what is the minimum thing that we all need to share.
Right. Got to be very clear on that. Very clear on that. And then, well, diversity can mean many different things for different people.
Yes,
At the end of the
I
day,
wouldn't
to be,
even go there.
yeah, that's
That's an
okay.
entire separate discussion here.
That's it. Yeah, yeah, I know. But Ellie, what a conversation! Lots of different takeaways. I'm pretty
Mm,
sure that this is going to help a lot of people. Startup founders to senior executives at large organizations. So thank you for making time here and
I hope
participating.
so. Thank you so much, Tamir, for the invite.
No, absolutely. It's been a pleasure to have you, and well, let's keep in touch.